The screaming started at 7:23 a.m. Karen's voice pierced through the morning stillness like a siren, her finger jabbing toward the fence line where 17-year-old Marcus had been quietly tending his grandmother's garden. "You don't belong here," she shrieked, her face twisted with rage. But as Marcus reached for his phone to call for help, the sound of approaching sirens made his blood run cold. Someone had already called the police, and in that moment, as Karen's triumphant smile spread across her face, Marcus realized this. It wasn't just about the garden, this was about something far more dangerous, something that would change everything. The tomato plants were Marcus's pride and joy, each one carefully staked and watered every morning before the sun climbed too high. He'd been nurturing them for 3 months now, ever since Grandma Rose had been hospitalized with her hip surgery. The garden had become his sanctuary, a place where the chaos of senior year and college applications faded into the simple rhythm of soil and growth. Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his gardening glove, surveying the neat rows of vegetables that bordered the chain-link fence separating his grandmother's property from the house next door. The new neighbor had moved. In 6 weeks ago, a woman in her 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair and an SUV that cost more than most people's yearly salary. She'd introduced herself as Karen Mitchell with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Morning, Marcus." He turned to see his grandmother's longtime neighbor, Mrs. Chen, waving from her kitchen window. She was 83 and had lived on Maple Street longer than anyone. Watching the neighborhood change from working-class families to young professionals and back again, Marcus waved back, grateful for her familiar presence in a world that seemed to shift daily. The shouting started without warning. Hey, what do you think you're doing?" Marcus straightened, his hands still dirty from transplanting seedlings. Karen Mitchell stood at her sliding glass door, her bathrobe cinched tight around her waist, her face already flushed with anger. It was 7:23 a.m. on a Saturday morning. "I'm sorry," Marcus called back, genuinely confused. He'd been working quietly, hadn't even turned on the radio yet. "Don't play dumb with me." Karen's voice carried across both yards, sharp enough to wake the dead. "I know exactly what you're doing, and I won't stand for it." She marched across her perfectly manicured lawn, her slippers slapping against the dewy grass. Marcus noticed she was carrying her phone, and something cold settled in his stomach. In the 3 months since Grandma Rose's surgery, he'd dealt with concerned neighbors, helpful friends, and the occasional busybody. But this felt different. This felt dangerous. "Ma'am, I'm just working in my grandmother's garden," Marcus said carefully, keeping his voice level. "Rose Williams. She's been in the hospital. I don't care whose garden it is." Karen's voice climbed higher, and Marcus saw curtains twitching in windows up and down the street. "You're trespassing. This is a private neighborhood." "I'm not trespassing. This is my grandmother's property." Marcus gestured toward the house behind him, where he'd been staying for the past month to keep an eye on things. "I live here?" "No, you don't." Karen's finger jabbed through the air like a weapon. "I've been watching you, coming and going at all hours, making noise, bringing your friends around. This is a respectable neighborhood, and we don't want your kind here." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Your kind. He'd heard those words before, felt their weight, understood their poison, but hearing them here, in his grandmother's garden, in the place where she'd taught him to nurture life from soil and seed, made his hands shake with more than just anger. My kind. Marcus's voice stayed steady, but inside, something was breaking. What kind is that, exactly? Karen's eyes narrowed, and she stepped closer to the fence. "Don't get smart with me, boy. I know what you are. I know what you people do." The racist slur hung in the air between them like smoke. Marcus felt his chest tighten, his breath coming shorter. He'd graduated third in his class, been accepted. 3 universities, spent every weekend for the past 2 years volunteering at the community center. None of that mattered now. None of that would matter to Karen Mitchell. "I'm calling the police," she announced, her phone already in her hand. "There's a suspicious person in my neighborhood, and I want him removed." "Please don't do that," Marcus said, and he hated how his voice sounded young, afraid, pleading. "I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just taking care of my grandmother's garden." But Karen was already dialing, her thumb moving across the screen with practiced efficiency. Marcus realized this wasn't her first time making this kind of call. This was routine for her. "Yes, hello?" I need to report a trespasser. Karen's voice suddenly shifted, becoming smaller, more vulnerable. There's a young black man in my neighborhood, and I'm scared. He's been watching my house, and now he's in someone's yard without permission. I think he might be trying to break in. Marcus's world tilted. Every word she spoke was a lie, but he knew how this would sound to whoever was on the other end of that call. He knew how these stories played out on the news, knew how they ended. Please, he said again, louder this time. I can show you my ID. I can call my grandmother at the hospital. I can prove I belong here. Karen ignored him, continuing. Her performance. He's getting aggressive now. I'm really scared. Please hurry. Marcus pulled out his own phone, fingers trembling as he tried to decide who to call. His parents were 3 states away at his sister's graduation. His grandmother was sedated after yesterday's surgery. The few friends he had locally were either at work or wouldn't wake up for hours. Mrs. Chen appeared at her back door, her face creased with worry. Marcus, honey, what's going on, Mrs. Chen? Marcus called out, relief flooding through him. Can you tell her I live here? Can you tell her I'm Rose's grandson? But Karen spun around, her face twisting with fresh rage. And now he's trying to get other people involved. He's disturbing the whole neighborhood. That boy has been taking care of Rose's place for weeks, Mrs. Chen said firmly, her voice carrying the authority of her 8 decades. He's a good kid. What's wrong with you? Stay out of this, or I'll call about you too. Open in shock. The sound of sirens reached them then, distant but growing closer. Marcus felt his knees go weak. He'd done everything right, kept his head down, worked hard, stayed out of trouble. But none of that mattered now. In Karen's narrative, he was the threat, the outsider, the one who didn't belong. You can't do this, Marcus said, his voice cracking. You can't just lie about people. Karen's smile was sharp as a blade. Watch me. The police cars turned the corner, their blue and red lights painting the morning in alternating colors of danger and warning. Marcus watched them approach, his heart hammering against his ribs, and realized that everything he'd worked for, everything he'd built, could disappear in the next few minutes. But as the first officer stepped out of his patrol car, Marcus saw something that made him straighten his shoulders and lift his chin. The officer was young, maybe in his 30s, with kind eyes and a careful way of moving that suggested he'd been in situations like this before. Morning, folks, Officer Rodriguez said, his voice calm and professional. I understand there's been some kind of dispute. Karen immediately launched into her story, her voice trembling with practiced fear. But as she spoke, Marcus noticed something else. Officer Rodriguez was watching him, not with suspicion or hostility, but with the kind of careful attention that suggested he was listening to more than just words. And in that moment, Marcus realized that maybe, just maybe, this story might not end the way Karen Mitchell expected it to. Officer Rodriguez approached with measured steps, his partner, older white officer, with graying temples hanging back by the patrol car. Marcus noticed the deliberate distance between them, the way Rodriguez positioned himself where he could see all parties clearly. Ma'am, I'm Officer Rodriguez. You called about a trespassing situation. His voice carried the professional courtesy of someone who'd learned to de-escalate before investigating. Karen's demeanor shifted instantly, becoming smaller, more fragile. Oh, thank goodness you're here. I've been so frightened. She gestured toward Marcus with a trembling hand. He's been lurking around the neighborhood for weeks. Today, I caught him breaking into that yard, and when I confronted him, he became aggressive and threatening. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Each word was a carefully crafted lie, but delivered with such conviction that even he almost doubted his own memory for a moment. I see, Rodriguez said, making notes in a small pad. And sir, what's your name? Marcus Williams, he answered, his voice steadier than he felt. This is my grandmother's house. Rose Williams. She's been in the hospital since her hip surgery, and I've been staying here to take care of the property. He's lying, Karen's voice cracked with emotion. I've never seen him before 6 weeks ago. He just started showing up, going through people's yards, casing houses. I think he's been planning something. Officer Rodriguez turned to look at the garden, taking in the neat rows of vegetables, the freshly turned soil, the careful organization of tools. These are your grandmother's plants. Some of them, Marcus said, grateful for the question. The tomatoes and peppers are mine. I planted them in March. Grandma Rose has been gardening here for 23 years. Mrs. Chen, next. Door can tell you she's known my grandmother since she moved in. Mrs. Chen stepped forward, her small frame radiating indignation. Officer, I've lived here for 35 years. Rose Williams is one of the finest people I know, and Marcus is her grandson. He's been taking care of this place while she recovers. This woman, she pointed at Karen, just moved in last month and has been nothing but trouble since day one. Karen's face flushed red. She's clearly been coached. They're probably working together. This is what they do. They target vulnerable neighborhoods. And ma'am, Rodriguez interrupted gently, let's take this one step at a time. Marcus, do you have any identification? Marcus pulled out his wallet with shaking hands. Extracting his driver's license and student ID, Rodriguez examined them carefully, noting the address that matched the house behind them. The address matches, Rodriguez said to his partner, who had moved closer to observe. That doesn't prove anything, Karen insisted. Anyone can get fake identification these days. I'm telling you, this boy doesn't belong here. This boy has a name, Mrs. Chen said sharply, and he's 17 years old. What's wrong with you, ma'am? I'm going to need you to step back, Rodriguez said to Karen, his tone shifting slightly. Let me do my job. Marcus watched as Rodriguez pulled out his phone and made a call. I'm running a check on the property records for 1247 Maple Street. Rose Williams, yes, hospitalized, I see. The minutes stretched like hours. Marcus could feel sweat beating on his forehead despite the cool morning air. He thought about his grandmother, probably just waking up in her hospital bed, trusting him to keep her little piece of the world safe while she healed. He thought about his parents, who'd worked double shifts for years to give him opportunities they'd never had. He thought about his acceptance letters to college, sitting on his desk upstairs, suddenly feeling as fragile as tissue paper. Records confirm Rose Williams has owned this property since 2001, Rodriguez announced, closing his phone. She's currently listed as a patient at St. Mary's Hospital. Karen's confident expression flickered for just a moment. Well, that still doesn't prove he lives here. Maybe he's just some kid she hired to do yard work. That doesn't give him the right to actually, ma'am, it does, Rodriguez said firmly. If he's been given permission to be on the property by the owner, then he's not trespassing. But I saw him going through the fence. Karen's voice was getting higher, more desperate. He was in my yard. He was trying to break into my house. Marcus felt his heart stop. That's not true. I haven't been in your yard. I've never even been close to your house. You're lying, Karen screamed, her carefully constructed facade cracking. I have video. I have proof. Rodriguez's eyebrows rose. You have video of him on your property? Yes, on my security camera. I'll show you right now. She marched toward her house, her slippers squelching in the wet grass. Rodriguez followed, gesturing for Marcus to stay put. Mrs. Chen came over to stand beside him, her small hand finding his elbow. That woman is poison, she whispered. She's been making trouble since she moved in. Called the city about my wind chimes being too loud, complained about the Martinez family's kids playing in their own backyard. She's one of those people who thinks the world should revolve around her. Marcus nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was about more than just a difficult neighbor. The way Karen had looked at him, the words she'd chosen, the immediate assumption of criminality, this was something deeper and more dangerous. Karen emerged from her house with a tablet, Rodriguez beside her. Here, look at this. She thrust the screen toward the officer, her finger jabbing at whatever she was showing him. Rodriguez studied the video for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Ma'am, this video shows someone walking along the fence line on what appears to be the Williams property. At no point does this person enter your yard. But he was looking at my house. He was planning something. Looking at a house from a public area isn't a crime, ma'am. Karen's face went white, then red, then purple. You're not going to arrest him. He's obviously a criminal. Look at him. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Look at him. Marcus felt every neighbor's eyes on him, felt the weight of assumptions and prejudices that had nothing to do with who he was or what he'd done. Officer Rodriguez's expression hardened. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to explain exactly what you mean. By that, I mean, he's obviously not from around here. He doesn't fit in. People like him. People like him. Rodriguez's voice cut through her stammering like a blade. Karen seemed to realize she'd stepped over a line. and to back down now, you know what I mean? This is a good neighborhood. We have standards. We can't just have random people wandering around whenever they want. Ma'am, this young man has provided identification proving he lives here. He's caring for his grandmother's property with her permission. You've shown me video that proves he hasn't trespassed on your land. What exactly would you like me to arrest him for? Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For making me feel unsafe. Making you feel unsafe by gardening on his own property. Yes, no, I mean, she looked around desperately, as if searching. For someone who would understand her logic, you have to do something. You can't just leave him here. Rodriguez closed his notepad with a decisive snap. Ma'am, making false reports to police is a serious offense. Filing a complaint about someone based solely on their race could be considered harassment. I suggest you think very carefully about your next words. Karen's face went ashen. For the first time since the confrontation began, she seemed to realize that her performance might have consequences. I wasn't. I never said anything about race, she stammered. You didn't have to, Rodriguez said quietly. Your meaning was clear enough. Marcus watched as Karen's world began to crumble around her, the same way his had seemed to just minutes before. But instead of feeling satisfaction, he felt something else, a recognition of how quickly anyone's life could change, how fragile the line was between safety and danger. Officer Marcus said softly, I just want to take care of my grandmother's garden. I don't want any trouble. Rodriguez nodded, his expression softening as he looked at the teenager, who'd handled the situation with more grace than most adults would have managed. I know you don't, son, and you shouldn't have to deal with this kind of harassment. He turned back to Karen, who was still standing frozen in her driveway. Ma'am, I'm going to file a report about this incident. I strongly recommend you consider whether you want to continue down this path, but as Rodriguez spoke, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. Karen wasn't looking defeated anymore. She was looking calculating, her eyes narrowing as she stared at him with pure hatred. And in that moment, Marcus realized that Officer Rodriguez's warning had just turned Karen from a nuisance into an enemy. The next 3 days passed in deceptive calm. Marcus continued his routine, watering the garden at dawn, checking on the house, visiting his grandmother at the hospital. But he felt eyes on him constantly, a prickling awareness that made him check over his shoulder every few minutes. Karen's house remained silent, her blinds drawn tight against the morning sun. No more confrontations, no more screaming matches across the fence. Mrs. Chen mentioned that Karen's car had been gone most of Tuesday, and Marcus allowed himself to hope that maybe she'd lost interest, maybe found some other target for her rage. He should have known better. Wednesday afternoon, Marcus was replacing a broken sprinkler head when he heard his grandmother's voice calling his name. He looked up to see her standing at the hospital room window, waving weakly. The sight of her upright and alert sent relief flooding through him until he noticed the police car pulling into the driveway. This time, it wasn't Officer Rodriguez. The older one, a sergeant with steel-gray hair, spoke first. Marcus Williams? Yes, sir. Sergeant Hayes, this is Officer Morrison. We need to ask you some questions about an incident that occurred yesterday. Marcus's stomach clenched. What kind of incident? A break-in was reported at 1249 Maple Street. The homeowner says she has evidence that you were involved. The address hit Marcus like a physical blow, 1249 Maple Street, Karen's house. The hospital all morning with my grandmother. Then I went to work at the community center. I have witnesses. Sergeant Hayes consulted his notes. The homeowner claims the break-in occurred around 2 p.m. She says her security camera shows you entering her property. That's impossible. I was at work from noon to 6 yesterday. You can check with my supervisor, Maria Santos. She can verify I was there the entire time. Officer Morrison stepped forward, his expression skeptical. Marcus wanted to refuse, wanted to demand a warrant, wanted to call a lawyer. But he also knew that any resistance would be seen as suspicious, would feed into whatever narrative Karen was building. Of course, he said, but I'm telling you, I wasn't there. They walked across the lawn to Karen's house, where she waited on her front porch like a spider in the center of her web. She'd styled her hair carefully, applied makeup to emphasize the dark circles under her eyes, and wore clothes that made her look smaller and more vulnerable. Officers, thank you for coming, she said, her voice trembling with carefully orchestrated emotion. "I was so scared to stay in the house alone after what happened." "Ma'am, if you could show us the footage," Sergeant Hayes said. Karen led them. Inside, her movements quick and nervous. Marcus noticed that her house was immaculate, not a single item out of place. No sign of any break-in or disturbance. But he also noticed something else. A small, professional-looking camera setup in the corner, more sophisticated than a typical home security system. "I installed extra cameras after the incident on Saturday," Karen explained, following his gaze. "I knew he'd be back." She pulled up the footage on her tablet, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. "Here, this is from yesterday at 2:15 p.m. The video showed a figure in a dark hoodie walking along the fence line, then cutting across Karen's yard toward her back door. The person's face was obscured, but they were roughly Marcus's height and build. The timestamp clearly showed to 15 p.m. Marcus stared at the screen, his mind racing. The figure looked like him, moved like him, even wore clothes similar to ones he owned. But he knew with absolute certainty that he hadn't been anywhere near Karen's house yesterday. "That's not me," he said quietly. "Oh, come on," Karen snapped, her vulnerable facade slipping. "Who else would it be? Look at the way he walks, the way he moves. It's obviously you, ma'am. We'll need to examine this footage more carefully," Sergeant Hayes said. "Can you email this to the station?" "Of course. But what about him?" Karen pointed at Marcus with a shaking finger. "He's still living right next door. I don't feel safe with him there." Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he'd had Saturday morning when Karen first started screaming. "Officers," he said carefully, "I'd like to call my supervisor at the community center. She can verify that I was at work when this supposedly happened." "That won't be necessary right now," Officer Morrison said. "We'll be conducting our own investigation." "But I can prove I wasn't here. The footage seems pretty clear," Morrison interrupted. "Unless you have a twin brother we don't know about." Marcus felt the walls closing in around him. The video evidence looked damning, even though he knew it was impossible. Karen's performance was flawless, her tears genuine looking, and he could see in the officers' faces that they were already building a case in their minds. "I want to see that footage again," he said. Karen reluctantly replayed the video, her tablet tilted so all three men could see the screen. Marcus watched intently, studying every detail of the figure on camera. But as he watched, something caught his attention. "Stop," he said suddenly. "Can you replay that part where he turns toward the camera?" Karen's finger hesitated over the screen. "Why? Just replay it, please." The footage played again, showing the hooded figure turning slightly as he approached the back door. For just a moment, part of his face was visible in profile. "That's not me," Marcus said with sudden certainty. "How can you be sure?" Sergeant Hayes asked. "Look at his left ear. I have a scar there from when I was 8. I fell off my bike and needed stitches. That person doesn't have a scar." The officers leaned closer to the screen. The image was grainy, but Marcus was right. There was no visible scar on the figure's ear. "The video quality isn't great," Morrison said dismissively. "A small scar might not show up." "It's a pretty prominent scar," Marcus insisted. "Ask my grandmother. Ask Mrs. Chen. They've both seen it." Karen's face had gone pale. The lighting was bad. The camera might not have picked up small details. "Then let's test that theory," Marcus said, pulling back his hoodie and turning his head to show his left ear. The scar was clearly visible, a thin white line that ran from his earlobe halfway up the outer edge. That's just a coincidence." Karen stammered. "Maybe the person was wearing makeup to cover it up. Or maybe," Marcus said quietly, "that's not me on the video." Sergeant Hayes was studying the footage with new interest. "Ma'am, do you have any other cameras that might have captured this incident?" "No, just the one." "But I don't understand why you're questioning this. The evidence is right there." "Carefully, but there are some discrepancies we need to investigate." "What discrepancies?" Karen's voice was rising, her careful composure cracking. "He's standing right there. He obviously broke into my house." "Ma'am, I don't see any evidence." "Of a break-in," Morrison said, looking around the pristine living room. "What exactly was taken or damaged?" Karen's mouth opened and closed silently. I scared him off before he could take anything, but he tried to break in." "No, but so no breaking and entering occurred. At most, we might be looking at trespassing." Trespassing, Karen's voice cracked. He was casing my house. He was planning to rob me. Ma'am, you can't arrest someone for what you think they might have been planning to do. Marcus watched Karen's face cycle through a range of emotions: disbelief, anger, desperation, and finally something that looked like calculation. He recognized that look from Saturday morning, the moment when she'd decided to escalate the situation. "Fine," she said suddenly. "If you won't arrest him for the break-in, then arrest him for harassment." "Harassment?" Sergeant Hayes asked. "He's been stalking me. Ever since Saturday, he's been watching my house, following me around the neighborhood. I have witnesses." Marcus felt his heart sink. Karen was improvising now, but she was good at it. Each lie built on the last, creating a web of accusations that would be difficult to disprove. "That's not true," he said, but his voice sounded weak even to himself. "Mrs. Patterson from across the street saw him lurking around my house. On Sunday, Mr. Johnson from the corner house saw him following me to the grocery store on Monday. I've been documenting everything." She pulled out a notebook filled with handwritten entry dates, times, detailed descriptions of Marcus's supposed stalking behavior. The entries were neat, consistent, and completely fabricated. "I've been afraid to leave my house," Karen continued, her voice breaking with emotion. "I installed extra security cameras because I was terrified of what he might do. And yesterday, my worst fears came true." Marcus stared at the notebook, realizing he was looking at something far more dangerous than a neighbor dispute. Karen had been planning this: the notebook, the extra cameras, the perfectly timed break-in. It was all part of an elaborate setup. "Ma'am," Sergeant Hayes said slowly, "these are serious accusations. We'll need to investigate thoroughly." "How long will tea?" Marcus didn't sleep that night. He lay in his grandmother's guest room, staring at the ceiling and listening to every sound outside: the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of traffic, the settling of the old house. At 3 a.m., he heard a car door slam and footsteps on gravel. He crept to the window and saw Karen loading boxes into her SUV by the light of her phone's flashlight. She was destroying evidence. By morning, Marcus had made a decision. He couldn't wait for the police investigation. To clear his name, not when Karen was actively working to frame him, he needed proof of his innocence, and he needed it fast. His first stop was the community center. Maria Santos, his supervisor, was a formidable woman in her 50s who'd been running youth programs for 20 years. She didn't just remember Marcus being at work on Tuesday, she had security footage to prove it. "You were here from noon to 6:15, Maria said, pulling up the digital records on her computer. "I remember because you stayed late to help Tommy Rodriguez with his college application essay. Sweet kid, but his English needs work." The timestamp on the footage showed Marcus clearly inside the community center at 2:15 p.m., the exact time. Karen claimed he was breaking into her house. He was wearing a red polo shirt and khakis, not the black hoodie and jeans from Karen's video. "Can you make me a copy of this?" Marcus asked. "Already done," Maria said, handing him a USB drive. "I heard what happened from Mrs. Chen. That woman's been calling the center too, asking questions about you, trying to dig up dirt. I told her to take her racism somewhere else." Marcus felt a chill. "She called here 3 times. Wanted to know if you'd ever been in trouble, if we'd had any problems with you. I told her you were one of our best volunteers. But she kept pushing, kept implying you were dangerous." Maria's eyes hardened. "I've seen her type before. They think they can destroy a kid's future with lies and manipulation. What do I do?" "You fight back, with facts, with witnesses, with proof. Don't let her win." Marcus's second stop was the hospital. His grandmother was sitting up in bed, looking stronger than she had in weeks, but her face fell when she saw his expression. "Baby, what's wrong?" Marcus told her everything: the confrontation, the false police report, the fabricated break-in evidence. Rose Williams listened without interruption, her weathered hands folded in her lap, her dark eyes growing harder with each detail. "That woman is evil," she said finally. "Pure evil. But she picked the wrong family to mess with. Grandma, I don't want you to worry about this. You need to focus on getting better. Don't you dare tell me not to worry about my grandson being targeted by a racist lunatic." Rose's voice carried the steel that had gotten her through 30 years as a high school principal. "I've dealt with people like her before. They think they can intimidate us, make us disappear. But we don't disappear. We fight. She reached for her phone. I'm calling my lawyer. Sarah Chen handled my estate planning. She's Mrs. Chen's daughter and one of the best attorneys in the city. If this woman wants a war, she's going to get one. By the time Marcus left the hospital, his grandmother had set up a meeting with Sarah Chen for the next morning. She'd also called 3 of her former colleagues' retired teachers who'd known Marcus since he was a child and who were willing to testify to his character. One more thing, Rose said as Marcus kissed her goodbye. Check the garden cameras. What garden cameras? I installed them last year after someone kept stealing my tomatoes. Motion-activated night vision, the whole system. I never told you, because I didn't want you to feel like I was watching you. She smiled, but I bet they caught something interesting. Marcus raced home, his heart pounding. If his grandmother's security system had recorded Tuesday afternoon, he'd have definitive proof that he wasn't at Karen's house. But when he checked the small digital recorder hidden in the garden shed, his hope crumbled. The system had malfunctioned on Monday. The memory card was corrupted, the footage unrecoverable. Marcus stared at the blank screen, feeling defeat settle over him like a heavy blanket. Karen had been thorough, had planned for contingencies. She'd probably disabled the system herself, had probably been watching his grandmother's house for weeks, learning its routines and vulnerabilities. He was walking back to the house when he heard his name called. Mrs. Chen was hurrying across her yard, her face flushed with excitement. Marcus, I found something. She held up her own tablet, her arthritic fingers swiping through video files. I have cameras pointed at my bird feeders to catch the squirrels, but they cover part of Karen's yard, and I caught that whole fake break-in on Tuesday. Marcus's heart stopped. You have video of the real person. Better than that, a video of Karen setting up the whole thing? The footage was grainy but clear enough. At 1:45 p.m. on Tuesday, Karen could be seen in her backyard, directing someone in a black hoodie, someone who was definitely not Marcus. The person was shorter, stockier, with a different way of moving. Karen handed them something keys, Marcus realized, and pointed toward her back door. She staged the whole thing, Mrs. Chen said, her voice shaking with anger. She hired someone to pretend to break into her own house, then edited the footage to make it look like you. Do you recognize the person she's with? I think it's her nephew. He's been visiting her since she moved in unemployed, always getting into trouble. She probably paid him to do this. Marcus felt a surge of hope so powerful it made him dizzy. This was the proof he needed to clear his name and expose Karen's lies. But as he reached for the tablet, Mrs. Chen's expression changed. Marcus, there's something else, something you need to know about Karen. What? I did some research after Saturday, found out why she moved here. Mrs. Chen's voice dropped to a whisper. She was fired from her last job, human resources manager at a big company. Multiple discrimination complaints, lawsuits, the whole thing. She's done this before, targeted people she doesn't like, tried to destroy their lives. Marcus felt ice in his veins. How many people? At least 6 that I could find. All young, all minorities, all people who didn't fit her idea of what was appropriate. She's good at it, Marcus. Really good. She knows how to work the system, how to make herself look like the victim. But we have proof now. Your video shows she's lying. Yes, but ... Mrs. Chen hesitated. I'm 83 years old. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, and I'm not good with technology. A good lawyer could make me look confused, unreliable, could make it seem like I don't know what I'm seeing. Marcus understood. Mrs. Chen's evidence was powerful, but it wasn't bulletproof. Karen would fight back, would try to discredit the elderly woman, just like she was trying to discredit him. What do? We get help, real help, from people who know how to fight people like Karen. That evening, Marcus sat at his grandmother's kitchen table with Sarah Chen, Mrs. Chen's daughter. The attorney was in her 40s, sharply dressed, with a kind of focused intensity that came from years of courtroom battles. Your grandmother called me, Sarah said without preamble, told me what's been happening. I've reviewed the police reports, the witness statements, the evidence. We have a strong case. A case for what? Civil rights violation? Harassment? Filing false police reports? Possibly conspiracy if we can prove she coordinated the fake break-in. Sarah's eyes were hard. This woman has a pattern of targeting people based on race. That makes it a federal case. Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Can you stop her? I can do better than that. I can make sure she never does this to anyone else again. Sarah leaned forward. But I need you to be prepared for what's coming. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. She's going to escalate, try to destroy your reputation, maybe even try to get you arrested on more serious charges. More serious charges? People like Karen don't know when to quit. When their first plan fails, they double down. She's already shown she's willing to fabricate evidence and commit crimes to frame you. What do you think she'll do when she realizes she's about to lose everything? Marcus thought about Karen's face when Sergeant Hayes had started questioning. Her story, the cold calculation in her eyes when she realized her mask had slipped. He thought about the boxes she'd been loading into her car in the middle of the night, the systematic way she'd been building her case against him. To try to destroy me, he said quietly. Yes, but we're going to be ready for her. Sarah stood, gathering her papers. I'm filing a restraining order tomorrow morning. I'm also reporting her to the FBI's Civil Rights Division. This ends now. But as Marcus walked Sarah to her car, he saw Karen watching from her window, her face pressed against the glass like a gargoyle. She raised her phone, took a picture of them together, and smiled. Marcus realized that Sarah was wrong about one thing. This wasn't ending now. It was just beginning, and Karen's next move would be the most dangerous yet.